Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Welcome our home church. Let us prepare our heart to heaven. Let us sing song, holy song, page 96. The heart of my country. 96. The heart of my country.
The heart of my country beckons to me to fill its emptiness. My Father long has spoken to me his desire this land to bless. He sends me on to life unknown, to work in a far-off place. He loves that land before I come, and through me he'll give it grace. The truth is sought by everyone in many a different way. In darkness, children seek the path that will hasten in the day. Through struggles of the centuries long, he has never ceased to fight. Our Father's will has kept them strong, and through him they'll live in light. Now, brothers, sisters, all join hands to encircle all the earth. Time has come for all mankind to know the world's rebirth. Whatever we do, wherever we go, we are all in one embrace. When we roll the clouds of dark away, we will see his shining face.
Thank you. Next song is 93. He has come. 93. He has come.
Korea, heart of the earth, you were chosen to give him birth. Land of the morning calm, from your hidden springs comes a healing balm for all men. He has come. His face is like the sun and like the moon, and soon the world will know his light. There will be no night. Oh, Father, with grateful hearts, we give pledge to you. We will do our part to bring love to him who gave us life, and to comfort you by ending strife for all men. He has come. His face is like the sun and like the moon. And soon the world will know His light. There will be no night. Who brought to us the Father's love? Who shed for us so many tears? One who nurtured us in Father's way, one who through the years taught us how to say to all men, He has come. His face is like the sun and like the moon. And soon the world will know His light. There will be no night.
Thank you. Let us stand up, greet the Heavenly Parents, God, and true parents. Today is 2017, September 10th, Sunday morning. Let us bow to Heavenly Parent, God, and true parents. 경배. 바로 Join to me prayer. 살아계 하시는 하나님 아버지 참부모님 안녕하십니까? Most lovely God and true parents, good morning. Here in the Maine, the beautiful sunrise and nice breeze coming in to our home and our heart. We are so grateful to be here. Yet, Heavenly Parents, we hear the natural disaster in the Florida and also Texas, and I can hear from the news the threatening of the nuclear weapon. Heavenly Parents, the world is changing, and the world is like people receiving or ignore that we can see the life of the decision is critical now. Heavenly Parents, we are grateful to our true parents guided us so many years to living for sake of others, loving each other, and tell truth. Heavenly Parent, yet this America itself divided the left and right. Heavenly Parents, we are critical time to the world. Heavenly Parents, please guide us that we can truly understand what time is now to the truly the last day and the second coming of Christ came. After came of Christ, what do we do now? How to prepare, how to understand this age. Heavenly Parents, please well prepare our heart and mind, opening up and receiving your guidance to our life and prepare well. And we have to also talk about that time is changing. We are serious time now. We cannot foolish around. We have to be deep prayer and deep thought and prepare for the new generation, for the new world. Please guide today we can think deeply and receive your guidance through our pastor. Please bless this time. I report in the name of Rahman and Tamik Montanaro Central Blessed Family. Aju, Aju, Aju. Amen. Thank you. Welcome. Please sit down. Thank you. Welcome our Pastor Montanaro. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I have so many things to share with you today, but I'll try to squeeze it into a short sermon. I don't know if I can do it, but we'll try. Okay, before I start, I want to talk about words a little bit. What is the traditional word for this ceremony on Sunday morning that in Christian churches? What is the word we usually use? Sunday service. Sunday service, right? The word service comes from the word serve, right? To serve somebody. So Christianity has this idea of serving God. But what does that make you if you are serving somebody? You are a servant. But through True Father's teaching, and actually Jesus was the Son of God, and so he talked about God as his Father. And we know that we in the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven. So we should not be serving God. Does a father want to be served by his children? Well, actually, yes. We do like that, you know. Sunday morning, nice breakfast in bed, love it. You know, nice things like that, all good. But more than being served by your children, what do you really want as a father or a mother? What do you want from your children?
Inherit from the
Inheritance. You want them to inherit from you. So we can call this the Sunday inheritance. Or what else? What other words come to mind? What do parents want to experience from their kids? God is our parent, not our master. He doesn't want us to serve him and be obedient. Of course, parents want obedience and service. That's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture. What do I want from you, children?
love.
Love. So we could call it Sunday adoration, but that's kind of to adore God. It's like, does God want to be worshipped by his children? Do you think that, we talk about Sunday worship, right? Then that word also doesn't cut it for me, because I don't think a parent wants to be worshipped. Well, maybe, you know, worship. No, you know. Parents don't want to be worshipped by their children. They want to be, now in the Korean, there's a word in the divine principle that Father taught us, which is one of the key words of the divine principle. It's a verb and a noun. The verb form is moshida. Moshida means to attend, to like take care of your parents, to serve, to attend, to love. It's all wrapped up in that word. It's what a filial son or daughter does to their parents. And I thought about the word filial piety, which is a Confucian term more than anything. And we could call this Sunday piety. But it sounds a little bit stiff. I don't know. So then, but attendance doesn't have the same feeling as moshida. Now the noun form of moshida is moshim. So you could say Sunday moshim. But all my American friends would be like, yeah, really? Okay. You know, it's like, it's not an American word, not an English word. So what is an English word to work? I don't know that I have one. Celebration? Maybe. Sunday celebration. Sunday, something to do with loving your parents. So right now we'll leave that open, okay? But maybe we can call it Sunday attendance of God, or Sunday being with God. I like that too. Sunday being with God, because that's what God wants us to be with him. As children, we should be with our parents.
Settlement?
What?
Settlement?
Settling? You don't want to settle with your parents. Okay. Anyway, you can all think about that. And if you have any comments, please put them in the comments section. You can give me your ideas. Okay. Let's start our sermon. Or, yes, our conversation with God and with each other. Today's sermon, the title is going to be Because of 12 Brides. Because of 12 Brides. And it's going to be a deep sermon, and maybe people who are not used to the Unification Movement will be a little bit over their head and they won't know what I'm talking about maybe sometimes, and I apologize. But if you would like, you should read the Divine Principle and read, which I will put the link in the notes. But for our members and for people who have some familiarity with the Unification Movement, this is a very important sermon, I believe. When I joined the Unification Church in 1980, I began to hear rumors that Reverend Moon, the founder of our movement, had had sexual relationship with many women before, in the early days of our church, through a ceremony called cleansing of the womb. That somehow through having a relationship with Father, women's wombs could be cleansed. They could be made into like a holy woman, because Father was the Messiah, and so he had to cleanse the womb. Most of the leaders of our church didn't know anything about this, and they would say, that's not true, it's just a rumor. And it is true that in 1955 or 56, the police raided our church because of rumors in Korea that there were women dancing naked in the basement of the church, and they found nothing, and they found that it was all a lie, that people were singing and praying and crying, and it was a very holy environment. And that's true. We know that the early days of our church the church was called the Church of Tears, because Father was always crying when he gave a sermon, and the members were crying, and they would sing sometimes the same song for an hour to build up the spirit before Father would speak. They would just sing and sing and sing and crying and crying and crying. This was the actual reality of our church. This we know. And when they came, they found the church didn't even have a basement to dance naked in. So clearly, many of the rumors were false. Then in 1998, Father's son, Hyojinim's wife, Nansuk, was estranged, and she wrote a book which criticized many things in our movement and revealed that Father had had a son in 1965 by a different woman. And then it was difficult, and our members began to struggle because they didn't know what to believe. Someone who is so close to the inner circle of Father's family should know the truth. And it became clear over time that she was not lying, that there had been a child born in 1965 to a different woman, not Father's wife. And then we began hearing these rumors of 6 Marys or something, where Father had a relationship with different women. And it became really kind of embarrassing. Many of our members could not speak about this. Didn't know how to talk about it. They kept denying it, but as the rumors grew and spread, and these rumors had already been going on in Korea for the last 50 years. So these are not new rumors. In Korea, we are known by Christians as Umnan-kyohae, the Church of Adultery. That's the name of our church in Korea. By Christians who don't like us, who call us a sect or who call us a cult or heretical movement. So you can see that I'm going somewhere very, very deep right now, and not someplace that I would normally talk about with a new member, somebody who just joined our church. But I think it's necessary to talk about this, because I think our church right now is going through a period, it's being challenged to understand and to overcome and to embrace the full, deepest truth about Father. Remember, the title of my sermon today is Because of 12 Women. Father was supposed to come in 1945, 1944, and he had the divine principle. He had prayed for 10 years in tears. He had confronted Satan. He had met with Jesus and God. He had met with saints in the spirit world. He had gone into the spiritual world. Like Paul says in the Bible, I know a man who was caught up to the third heaven, whether in this body or not, he says in Corinthians. And he he went to the highest realm of the spirit world. So Paul talks about, and being taken up into heaven. And Father was taken up into heaven many times. He visited the spiritual world, where people go when they die. He could talk to people who had lived and died. And he could talk to Jesus, and he could talk to other saints, and he could talk to Moses, and he could talk to Noah. He talked to Adam, he talked to Eve. He talked to Satan, he confronted Satan. And he discovered and he revealed the divine principle. And by 1945, Father was teaching this on the streets of Seoul, right after World War II, when the Japanese had just left Korea, and the Japanese occupation was over, and churches were springing up. It said in Korean history that churches were springing up like mushrooms after the rain. Everywhere, on every corner, Christian churches were popping up because the Koreans are deeply religious people, like the Jewish people were 2,000 years ago. Deeply faithful people. And these churches were suppressed during the Japanese time, Japanese occupation. And now Christianity was expressing itself in full bloom. And there were preachers everywhere on the streets preaching, and Father was one of them, preaching the new truth of the divine principle. And he began to get a following, and many people began to follow his teaching, and they would leave their churches to come follow Father. And the church leaders were jealous of Father, and they began spreading rumors about Father. Father was called then by God to go to North Korea, which was now under Satan's occupation. Communism had taken over. Kim Il-sung, the grandfather of the current dictator of North Korea. Kim Il-sung had taken over power. He was a puppet put in by the Soviet Union to confront the free world on the 38th parallel, the line between North and South Korea, which is still there. And it was the communists were consolidating power. They were gaining more and more power. The Christian churches were still flourishing, but they were under the eye of the communists, and the communists were plotting how to destroy them. And it's a very complicated, long story I don't have time to go into. But Father was embraced by many Christians. And then again the same thing happened. Christians were confused and jealous because his new teaching did not follow the traditional dogmas and doctrines of Christianity. It went beyond the teachings of Christianity. It went to the heart of the Bible and Jesus' words and Jesus' heart and who he was. And it revealed things that no one had ever known before about the fall, about restoration, about God, about the nature of Jesus and who he was and what the second coming would have to be. And eventually the same thing happened in North Korea. The Christians turned him into the communists. He was tortured, thrown out for dead, bleeding from his mouth, his nose, all his organs were broken. He was going to die. He was nursed back to health by his disciples, and he began teaching again. Again he was arrested, and finally he was tried and convicted of disturbing the peace. That was the crime that he was convicted of. And he was sentenced to 5 years in a slave labor death camp in the northeast coast of Korea, Hungnam, where he served 2 years and 8 months until the Korean War broke out, and MacArthur, General Douglas MacArthur's brilliant maneuver of landing at Incheon Harbor, where the tides go up 36 feet. Most tides are 6 to 10 feet. In Incheon and in the north, in that bay of Korea, the tides go up and down 36 feet twice a day. 36 feet. That's like a 3-story building. That's how much the water goes up and down. And he made a brilliant maneuver landing battleships at the high tide at the northernmost part of the battle zone. And he cut off the communist supply lines. And at the same time on the East Coast he was bombing, and that's when Hungnam was bombed, and that's when Father and all the other prisoners who were not already killed were released. Father was supposed to die the next day. He was ready for execution the next day. And he traveled back to Pyongyang, the capital, gathered his few disciples, 1 or 2 people that were ready to come with him, and he walked all the way 600 miles to the south with a man with a broken leg on a bicycle and a young 18-year-old Kim Won-pil, his first disciple. So that was the Father that became to South Korea. Emaciated, he looked like a skeleton from being in prison for 2 years and 8 months in a slave labor camp. And he began teaching in Busan, then he moved to Daegu, then he moved to Seoul. Thousands of people began hearing the divine principle. Hundreds began joining. There was controversy everywhere Father went. And in spite of the controversy, people were joining. Whole universities were shaken up and turned upside down by Father's teaching. Famous private universities, Christian universities, where all the students came and heard his teaching. It was during this time that the rumors about Father began to spread about some kind of sexual misconduct. Korea is very, very concerned about purity of love. Nothing to a Korean is more important than their sexual purity. That family and sexual purity is everything to Koreans. So that was the most terrible rumor that could be spread about Father, that he was committing adultery. We don't know any details about that time, except that thousands of people were joining. Father was under constant accusation, and by 1960, he had already been married by 1945, but then his wife left him because of his teaching and the persecution. She was from a very prominent, famous Christian family. Her name was Che, and she left him. She refused to be married to him anymore. She demanded a divorce. Father had to give it to her, which also was an accusation against him. By 1960, he was able to marry a young woman named Han Hak-ja and began to create another family. Finally able to have children with one woman and make the first we call true family. When I joined in 1980, Father had mother was about to give birth to one or two more children, but she'd already given birth to 12 children, one of whom had died at birth, just after birth. So there were 11 children, and I think one or two more were born after I joined. Jung Jin-im was born in 1982. So finally Father had 13 children with mother. But still these rumors were circulating. I was taken to the stacks at UCLA when I was working in California. I was taken to the stacks by one of my spiritual children, and he showed me a little blue book in the stacks that was translated from the Korean. And in it was this person who hated Father so much, and he was a Korean, and had been translated from the Korean to English. And my spiritual son, he forced me to read this section that said that Father had sex with all the women in the church to cleanse the womb. And he asked me, what do you think about that? And I didn't know what to say. I'd never met Father personally. I'd been in California while he was working in the East Coast most of the time. And I just studied the Divine Principle and studied his teaching and studied everything. So I didn't really know much about Father that much, except what I believed and what I learned. But after praying about it, I said to my friend, I said, you know, I don't know what Father had to do to cleanse the original sin. I don't know. But whatever it was, it worked. And he's giving the blessing now to thousands of people. And he's removing their original sin. And they're able to create true families. They're able to create families, good families. So whatever he did is fine with me. If he had to have sex with 1,000 women, I don't care. I said that to my friend. And he just shook his head like this. And he never came back. He couldn't handle that. So let's talk about that right now. All my Christian friends who are watching, and our church members who are watching. What is the mission of the Messiah? What does he come to do? Anyone? What do you think? What does the Messiah come to do? What do you think?
Restore.
Say it louder.
Restore.
Restore. Restore what?
People.
People. Okay, good. He doesn't have to restore squirrels. They're not fallen, right? They didn't have any sin. He doesn't have to restore trees, right? Trees are fine, right? Some of my best friends are trees, my friend says. Trees are fine. Squirrels are fine. It's people, right? He has to restore people. From what? What's wrong with us? Why do we keep creating? Even Christian countries. Now listen. You might say, well, Christians, we're not that bad. It's other religions, it's other people. American Christians, we're the best. We're America, love it or leave it. But I'll tell you that the divorce rate is just as high in Christian families as it is in non-Christian families. Maybe a little bit lower. But you still see divorce, adultery, fornication, sexual betrayals in Christian culture. And you have for 2,000 years. Does anyone want to deny that? You can type in the comments if you want to deny that. But Christian culture, also the wars between Christian nations, World War I and World War II, were between Christian nations. Kaiser Wilhelm was a Christian, or at least nominally, in World War I. And his ally, Austria, Hungary, they were Christian. And they attacked England and France, who were Christian. And you don't have to look very far in European history to see 100 more wars between Christians. The 130 Years' War, from 1517 to 1648, the 100 Years' War, you could say, ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, was between Christians, Catholics and Protestants. So war, adultery, bloodshed, incest, sexual deviance, pornography, homosexuality, all the problems that we see in the world around us are just as prevalent in Christian culture as they are in Islamic culture or Asian culture. We see the same misuse of love. Why? We know, and you have to study Reverend Moon's teaching if you want to go deeper, so please, you're welcome. I'll put the link. You can read this anytime. On my website, also blessedfamilysanctuary.org, you will find all the links for these. We understand that the fall between Adam and Eve and Lucifer, Satan, was not because they disobeyed God by eating a fruit, but that these two trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life, are symbols of Eve and Adam, respectively. And the snake is a symbol of Lucifer, an angel. And the fruit is a symbol of Eve's love. And eating the fruit was a symbol of having sex. So when Lucifer tempted Eve with the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is her own fruit, her own sexual reproductive organ, it meant that he had a sexual relationship with her. An angel and a human being. This is unprincipled. It's wrong. And it created damage to the first woman. Our great-great-great-grandmother was seduced by an angel. And she was filled with guilt and shame and fear because she knew what she'd done was wrong after she'd done it. And also anger because she felt betrayed and lied to by Lucifer. So fear, guilt, shame, anger. Does anyone relate to those? Women out there, do you feel in your heart toward men guilt and shame and fear and anger? Is there any sexual relationship between men and women that is free from guilt and shame and fear and anger? And this is the problem. When you have, and men, we're filled with lust and confusion and sexual desire, irrepressible sexual desire that we don't understand how to control. And, we're watching pornography, right? And we're looking at women with the wrong eyes, we know it. And Christian men out there, do you feel that what I'm saying is true? Does it speak about you? Do you look at women the wrong way? Jimmy Carter, when he was running for president, was criticized. Although I think it was very brave of him to do it, to say that he's looked at women with lust. I think it was very brave and honest of him to be that honest. He was a Christian. Actually, wasn't he the son of a pastor or something? I think he was anyway from a family that was very, very Christian. I think Southern Baptist or something. But he was honest. He said, I lust after women. All of us do. All men do. Paul did. If we look at the Bible, Paul says, wretched, this is Romans, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? So with my mind, I seek to serve the law of God, but in my body, I see another law, at war with the law in my mind, making me captive to the law of sin. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. For what I hate, that I do. He's talking about sex. If we go to Corinthians, we can see in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul's solution. He says, "Now concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman." He basically goes on to say it's better if you're celibate. It's better if you never marry. But if you're burning with lust, it's better that you marry than that you commit fornication. And I say this as a concession, he says, not as a commandment. Meaning, if you really can't handle it, go get married, but don't commit adultery and go with prostitutes and things like that. But his solution is celibacy. He said, don't get married. You guys are still kind of young, right? So this is all like maybe, theoretical for you. Not like such a big deal. But you're 13. That's the age. You start to feel things, right? You're 17, 16? 17. 16. You'll be 17 in a few months. All of us, as soon as we hit puberty, hormones are raging, right? We start to think about the opposite sex all the time. And we don't want to talk about homosexuality here, but some people have an opposite effect when they hit puberty because of, we can talk about this later, spiritual forces and dynamics that are going on that cause them to identify, usually because they have a kind of a difficulty in their lineage and their parents and something wrong there. They start to identify with the same sex. And we can talk about homosexuality later. But for most people, they start, when they hit puberty, they identify with the opposite sex, they start to have strong feelings of attraction. You can't help it. It's the way God made us. It's natural. But because of the fall, that feeling of love is intertwined, mixed up with strong guilt and shame and fear, because we know that we're not true. Our love is not true love. It's dirty. It's like cesspool love. You know what a cesspool is? A sewer. A cesspool. It's like where all the poop from the house goes when it flushes down the toilet, goes into a tank and a leach field many times. And it sits there and it drains out the water, and then the sludge made out of all the poop. That's a cesspool. Nice, right? Mm-hmm. And then a tanker comes in once a year or twice, every once a couple of years, and sucks it out. And those trucks, you don't want to get behind them when you're driving. They have a big tube, and it's like, let's slow down a little bit here, They're sucking out all the poop, cleaning out the septic tank. But we have septic love. Septic love. Our love is poisonous, it's toxic, it's not true love. Paul knew it. That's why he said, it's better that you remain, even as I am, celibate. But if you can't help it, marry. And many great Christians chose to be celibate. St. Francis, right? All the priests and nuns and popes of 2,000 years of Catholic history. Many Protestants chose to be celibate. Thomas Aquinas, of course, was a Catholic. St. John of the Cross, Marie Teresa of Avila. We can look at Mother Teresa. All of them celibate. Because they chose to not go into the cesspool if they could avoid it. But in their heart, do you think their heart was still going through cesspool love? Septic love? Yes. So when you talk about restoring, you're talking about each one of our hearts as a cesspool. It's not pure. It's not true. It's not beautiful. Okay, now, let's fast forward. Jesus comes, a true man. He fights with and defeats Satan. His heart then is crystal clear. God's love, God's presence can flow right through Jesus into the world. He's the Messiah, the Son of God. And what do we do to him? Do we welcome him? We crucified him. We killed him. Why would you kill someone so beautiful, so pure? Why? Why? What do you think? Why do you think the leaders of the Jewish people and the Romans chose to put Jesus on a cross rather than follow this beautiful, clear, crystal clear, wonderful man? Why would they kill him? Why?
Jealous.
They're jealous. Women were following him. Women were cleaning his feet with their tears. You can read the Bible. It's in the Bible. It looks like Mary Magdalene was weeping at his feet right before the crucifixion. She knew he was going to die. And she was weeping. And her tears were wetting his feet. And she was using her hair to clean his feet. This is completely improper behavior in a Jewish cultural context. The Jews were like the Koreans. Really, sex was very, very limited and controlled. Think of modern Islam. If an Islamic woman was weeping and cleaning a teacher's feet with her hair, what do you think would happen to that woman in an Islamic culture? What would they do to her? In fundamentalist Islam, they would stone her to death. This is what the Jewish culture was like 2,000 years ago. So these women were all around Jesus, loving him with their whole heart. And we're going to hear about that in a second. And men were jealous. That is true. That's a core. What other reasons can you think of? Why would the Jewish leaders and the Romans want to kill Jesus? Why would anyone want to get rid of a guy so beautiful, so pure? Jealousy.
They would lose all the evil, power they have, or anything.
Right, they're afraid of
evil
losing their power. This guy's powerful. His clarity, Jesus' clarity, he was supposed to be the King of Kings. In Isaiah it says, and unto us a son is born, unto us a child is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace. Right? Isaiah talks about Jesus coming as the King of Kings. He was supposed to be the King of Kings. But because of the crucifixion, he never could achieve that. So, yes, he was supposed to be, and God was heading him toward, if the people had accepted him as the Messiah, what would they do? What would they make him?
King of everyone.
He'd be the king. He would become the king. So the King Herod was jealous, afraid of losing his power. The Romans were afraid of an insurrection, right? They had this colonial power going on in Israel. They were controlling things with the Roman governor, Pilate. And they didn't want to lose their power, the control over this vassal state. And Jesus was an upstart, and he looked a little bit dangerous, like a rebel. Okay? Finally, there was one more reason why. Why would fallen man, who's full of sin, a dirty, sick heart, men and women both, sick, dirty heart about love, why would they want to kill someone who comes to them with a beautiful, pure heart? Why?
They can feel their own shame of the.
That's right.
And they have to change.
He's like a mirror, like a looking glass. He makes you see your sin. When you look into Jesus' eyes, all you feel is your own shame and sin and guilt. Right? If you're a thief, where do you want to go to hang out? Do you hang out with people who are pure and true and righteous and honorable? Well, who do thieves hang out with?
Same.
Thieves.
Other thieves. Right? Murderers hang out with murderers. Criminals hang out with criminals. All of us are spiritual criminals compared to the Messiah. When the Messiah comes, we're afraid he's going to reveal my sin. He can show my sin to the world. And I'm scared. I'm scared. How many movies are there where the good guy confronts the bad guy, says, I know you did it. Right? I know you did this, killed this person, or I know you did this, right? And then the bad guy goes, well, I'm so sorry that it has to end this way, and he gets his gun out, right? To kill the good guy. Who he goes, does anyone else know what you've told me today? Let me get rid of you before you tell anyone else. Right? How many plots are like that in movies, right? Where someone knows the truth. Like, I don't know if the Andromeda Strain was like that. There's 100 political thriller movies where one guy knows the truth and everyone's trying to kill him. Right?
Trump.
Which one?
Trump.
Trump?
That's what he's dealing with.
Let's not go into modern politics. That's too controversial. Yeah. What I'm saying is controversial enough. Okay, so the key thing is this. When we're bad people, we have a good part of ourselves too, but we have a bad part of ourselves. And when the Messiah comes, it reveals our sin, our septic love. And this is why Jesus was killed. A beautiful, pure, crystal clear man with true love, pure love, was killed by fallen people. It took God 2,000 years and all of Christian history to rebuild the foundation that was lost when Jesus was killed. God had worked from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob and Esau's struggle. Then finally the son of Jacob, Judah, his grandson, Joseph, right, was sold into, his son, Joseph, was sold into slavery in Egypt. Then he became the prime minister and saved the Jewish people. Then 400 years of slavery in Egypt. Moses then leads the people out. Then there's 400 years of judges, and then 120 years of united kingdom, and then 400 years of divided kingdom, northern Israel and southern Judah. And then the period of Babylonian captivity and return. And finally 400 years of preparation for Jesus to come, where they were occupied by Assyria, Greece, and finally Rome. All that suffering, 2,000 years, actually 1,930 years, had to be repeated in Christian history. 400 years of persecution under Rome, 400 years of patriarchs in the early primitive feudal Christian system, 120 years of united Christian kingdom starting with Charlemagne, then 400 years of divided kingdom, East and West Franks, and then finally the Babylonian captivity of the Pope into Avignon, France, and then a period of confusion, and finally Martin Luther in 1517, exactly 500 years ago, prints the 95 Theses and tacks them on the door of a church in Wittenberg, Germany, proclaiming the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, cleaning up the church. And that begins a period of 400 years of preparation for the second coming of the Messiah, who came right after 1917, 400 years after Martin Luther. In 1920, Reverend Moon was born in a small town in North Korea, in a very religious family, who converted to Christianity when he was a young boy, and began his mission, his search for truth, which ended in him meeting Jesus and spending 10 years to find the divine principle. Father was that beautiful, that clear. He also confronted Satan. He confronted Satan with the crime that Satan had committed in the Garden of Eden. He said, "You committed adultery with Eve, didn't you? And then you tricked her into committing adultery with Adam, and our human ancestors fell because of you. Sexual fall because of you." And Satan turned white and had to flee Father. Father's life from that point on was hell. Satan was trying to kill him, destroy him any way he could, using any connection he had with all of us, just like he did with Jesus. Jesus, how many times if you read the New Testament, how many times did the Jews pick up stones to kill Jesus and Jesus had to flee? He did not have a cozy relationship with the scribes and Pharisees and with the Sadducees and the leaders of the Jews. Father did not have a cozy relationship with Christianity. He should have. Christianity was prepared to receive him. But the key leaders, based on the same reasons that Jesus was crucified, could not accept Father. But you have to understand, you have to believe, and this is where you have to study yourself, because I can't give this to you. But if you read the Divine Principle and study it with me, I've got Divine Principle lectures on my website, all the Divine Principle, from the introduction to the conclusion. I've done video sermons, video lectures. You're welcome to watch them or read it yourself. But after you read that, you will understand why I say Reverend Moon was the second coming of Christ. And like Jesus, he was crystal clear. He was pure. He was true. And his love was true love. Like crystal clear water. If you've been drinking sewer water your whole life, and suddenly you come upon a clear pool of crystal clear, a spring of water, how happy are you? And who's going to recognize a true man's true love first? Men or women? Who's going to recognize a true man's true love first? Men or women? You have to understand that you do not remove this stain of love by words, by teaching. Father taught many amazing sermons, many things he said that were true, and beautiful sermons. But that's not how he fixed the problem, the restoring problem. When Christianity failed, when all the leaders fled, when all the leaders betrayed him and hated him and tried to kill him and put him in prison. He was already been in prison 4 times by the time he was 35 years old. When that's the situation you're in, how do you restore the world when the entire world is hating you? And yet you have the truth. You have the love that can save the world. Father was asked by God to do the unthinkable. He chose 12 women. Remember what I talked about? Cesspools of love. We tend to think if a man has a relationship. Have you ever seen, in the movies? Remember Beastly? We saw the previews for Beastly. I don't know if you saw the movie Beastly. And the guy says, what does he say at the beginning? Are you electing me because I'm popular and handsome and rich? Hell yeah! He goes, oh, and he's all arrogant and proud of himself because he's popular and handsome and rich. Right? Is that true? Does that happen in the world? Yeah. Yeah. So we think of that kind of guy. When we think of a guy with girls hanging on him, like a playboy, we think of that kind of guy, don't we? Somebody who's really evil, really selfish. Like someone who will use women, like Hugh Hefner in Playboy or something like that. Like these, rich people who or like athletes. How many? Will Chamberlain said he had sex with 25,000 women. I think that's an exaggeration. But I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration. Some of these basketball players and football players and even baseball players and they're on the road most of the time. They're on the road. And when they get in a hotel, the fans, the groupies, find out where they are, what room they are, and knock on their door and offer themselves. Girls want nothing better than to sleep with, Derek Jeter, or to sleep with, some other famous star, to sleep with Tom Brady if they could, or sleep with whoever. Girls are following them around. Every night, at every hotel they stay in, there's girls waiting. And do you think that they're keeping their purity most of the time? When we think of a man who is misusing love, we think of that. We think of a handsome, rich, famous guy who all the women want, and they gather around like a harem. And that was what Father was accused of. Having sex with all these women. But you have to understand. Father was every day, and this is we know this for a fact, weeping as he shared about Jesus' heart. Weeping. Spending 10 hours in sermon time. Someone speaking for 10, 15 hours straight with tears. Is that the image you have of a guy that's hanging around with babes? Not at all. So what's going on here? Father knew he had to restore the bride of Christ that is mentioned in the book of Revelation. The church is supposed to be the bride of Christ, right? The Christian church is the bride of Christ. We are the bride of Christ. But the bride of Christ failed, left Father, betrayed him, just like the bride of Christ failed Jesus. So Father had to rebuild that foundation. And he chose to love 12 women as representatives, like the 12 gates of the city of Jerusalem that comes out of heaven in the book of Revelation. And it says, and the holy city had 12 gates, and in the center was the tree of life. The tree of life is the Messiah. And the gates are these 12 women. Don't think of Father hanging out with a bunch of babes in bikinis. That's not what was going on. Think of Father choosing 12 women who are confused, angry, guilty, shameful, cesspools. Father is jumping in, diving in to 12 cesspools. A pure, crystal clear man with true love is taking on the difficulties, the history, the pain of 12 women, loving them and taking care of them for years until their hearts were completely cleansed and healed. That was the condition that Father set. So the title of my sermon, Because of 12 Brides. Let me add to that now. Ready? because of 12 brides, not in spite of them. You know what that means, in spite of something? Do you know what that means? Like he won the pennant in spite of his broken arm, right? Like we just watched a wonderful movie, For the Love of the Game, with Kevin Costner, right? And he pitches a perfect game. But the last 2 innings, he has nothing left in his arm. You know? His arm is like rubber, probably. So he's throwing meatballs. He's throwing just junk, which can be hit out of the park by any good hitter. So he's relying on his team. And the last 6 outs, his team comes through and actually does wonderful, miraculous plays in the field to keep the game perfect. And we could say then, he won that game in spite of his arm at the end of the game. In spite of the pain he was going through in his arm, he won the game. Was Father the Messiah in spite of these women that were in the past? Like, we're going to overlook that. That was a mistake Father made. Father was weak. Like how Christians sometimes believe that Jesus was weak in the Garden of Gethsemane. His human weakness, he was praying, "My Father, let this cup of death pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Was he weak that he was weeping there? No. Powerful man, not afraid of death. But he knew that if he were killed by the chosen people would be tortured and persecuted for 2,000 years, which they were, ending in Auschwitz and all the other concentration camps. And Christianity would be suffering and persecuted for 400 years, as they were under Nero and under all the evil emperors of Rome. And he knew that 2,000 years of history would have to pass before the Messiah could come again. And he was weeping for the people and weeping for God. How dare you say that man was weak? Jesus was not weak. He was unafraid of death, but he was weeping for God and for us, because he knew his mission was to stay on the earth and to make a true family and to restore mankind. But he couldn't do it if he died on the cross. All he could do was open the door for spiritual salvation, which we have through his crucifixion and resurrection. And Father was not weak to love these women. He was diving into cesspools. He was taking care of 12 fallen women and raising them up with love. And through that condition, the entire spirit world was watching. And all the women in the spirit world were watching. And they knew this is a true man. They could see spiritually crystal clear love coming from him. Healing these women. Taking care of these women. Opening their hearts again. Taking away the sin of the fall. For the first time in history, taking away the sin of the fall. Do you understand? Father removed their original sin with love. And then he started the institution of the blessing ceremony, the marriage ceremony, where he matched women in our church who should all become his brides, but they could only do it symbolically. These 12 women were the core. After that, every woman in our church who goes to the blessing should receive Father's love spiritually. They should become a bride of Christ. I'm not worthy to be my wife's husband. She should be married to the Messiah, a true man. So Father instituted the blessing, where all the women through the blessing became his brides, spiritually. And then they could take care of their husbands who were fallen archangels, fallen Adams, fallen men. Lustful, confused, dirty cesspools of love. And so they have to dive into us. They have to take care of us. So we men are saved through our wives. And the wives are saved through the Messiah. That's the pattern of salvation that Father created. You have to know this is true. That's why I can say Father's a Messiah because of these 12 brides, not in spite of them. Anyone who's ashamed of Father or thinks that he's fallen or dirty or evil has a lot to learn. Please pray about this. Please pray deeply. There's so much good news we can share with people now. Through home church, a couple that Father created, where a woman who has received Father's love and felt cleansed and purified. And it takes years, maybe generations, but she's going through this process of healing her heart. And then taking care of me as her husband and loving me and taking care of my problems and raising me up. And finally, this couple, come honey, finally this couple can stand in front of you and say, well, we're not perfect, but we're getting there. And we can represent true parents for you. And we can teach you about what Father did and who he was. And we can give you a piece, a little bit of the love that Father gave us and the truth that Father gave us. And then you have to do your own homework and research and pray and dig in and do your own work to restore yourself. But we can also introduce you to a spouse, and we can help you get the blessing, and we can represent true parents for you. And this is what Father gave us. He died 5 years ago in September of 2012 at the age of 92, almost 93. But his life was victorious because he opened the doorway for true love and for true families, and therefore for the kingdom of heaven on earth. He was the second coming of Christ, and he went through the same struggles and persecution that Jesus went through, times 10, because Jesus was only on the earth for 3 years. Father had to go through this for 70 years, or more, 80 years. His whole life, because he was born under Japanese occupation. Christians were being burned alive in churches while he was a young boy. So his whole life was in the center of the struggle between God and Satan. Please don't turn away from such a man. Don't be ashamed of such a man. Don't make that mistake. Have courage. What is courage? Courage is the heart to do what is right, even when it hurts. Courage is the heart to do what's right, even when it hurts you, or it can hurt you. Have courage. Study Father's teaching. Study Father's life. Pray about it. Ask God. Ask Jesus. And I know you'll get the answers. And all you young people have to pray deeply to understand, to inherit Father's love and become husbands and wives yourselves who can confront Satan and kick him out. We want a Satan-free world. Right? A pure love world. A crystal clear, pure love world. And there's no way to do that without tears. Father was a man of tears. Not an adulterer, not a lustful man. A man of tears, a man of love. And this is the key to understanding this very controversial part of Father's past. Let's pray. Dearest Heavenly Father, thank you so much. We want to offer this sermon to you, these words to you. We pray that these words can go in the hearts and minds of each of the listeners, and that they can be reborn and given new life to understand that Jesus is not dead. He's living in Christ, in second coming of Christ, Reverend Moon. And Reverend Moon is not dead. He's living in us. And in anyone who proclaims the Messiah and lives with the Messiah, we can feel your presence, Father, in our lives. And we can restore the fall. And we can confront Satan. And we can make Satan surrender to us. Last week we talked about making Satan surrender. Father, help us to become true sons and daughters of God, who through our love, true love between husband and wife, between us and the Messiah, between us and you, Father, through that kind of foundation, I pray that we can build the kingdom of heaven on earth, restore the Garden of Eden, and end Satan's dominion of this earth, and start your true dominion, Heavenly Father. We offer ourselves to you. We ask your blessing on this day. We offer all these things. 축복 중심 가정 라만과 다미고 모토나리 이름으로 보고드립니다. 아주 아멘.